It's the day you've all been waiting for. It's match day, and the first time we get to see the brilliant, the wonderful Christian Mosquera. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys and girls for another episode of what is the Arsenal Transfer Show on match day, of course, taking on Tottenham in the first North London derby outside of the UK, an opportunity for Arsenal to see, and their fans, of course, to see their brand new signings, including someone called Victor Gyokeres and, of course, Christian Mosquera, both of them, of course, with an opportunity to play in today's game for the first time since making the move to the club official. So, yes, an exciting day, certainly a very exciting one. And the final friendly, of course, of this Asian tour before Arsenal return to London tomorrow. I'm told they'll be flying tomorrow back to London. And then they've got two more friendlies. They play Villarreal on Wednesday. They've then got the weekend match against Athletic Club on the Saturday. And then, of course, it is the start of the Premier League season. So, exciting times. The wait is almost over, and we are nearly very much at the point of the season that raises so much excitement and expectation. Good morning to all of you in the chat box. Really appreciate you so much for tuning in and listening, especially those of you listening on catch-up that can't join in live. You are all appreciated too. TG, Arasilki, Matt G, Temi, we got Lee, we got Maximius, we got Shari and Blackshine and Claire, we got Martin and Freddie, Steve Stone, we've got other Martin, we've got old Dave in the chat box, not seen for a little while. Evan, Langdon, we've got Rowan and Glenn, we've got Barry, we've got Tom, we've got Not Too Busy and Hooded Gooner and Sir Nicholas. Good morning to you all. Thank you so much to all of you for tuning in and listening. It is greatly appreciated, and hopefully you'll drop a like on today's video. Help us to reach 1K every single day on the show, as we have been doing so successfully over the last however many weeks. But it's been an absolute pleasure to continue to join and speak with you every single morning. Right, let's jump, though, into today's stories. And we begin with nothing, apparently, because I've not actually selected it. So there you go. Absolutely nothing is happening. It is, as I mentioned, match day. Arsenal taking on Tottenham in the first North London derby outside of England and the UK. I don't know if it's outside the whole of UK. I'm trying to think if that's ever happened before where Arsenal played Spurs outside of England. Was there ever a cup game held elsewhere, a pre-season game? Maybe our older listeners will be able to let me know if that is indeed happened. Because from my 30-year-old brain, trying to remember that far back, I'm not sure if the one has happened outside of England, in Scotland or Wales or somewhere like that. I'm trying to think. Millennium Stadium. Was Millennium Stadium potentially? I'm trying to think if that was the semi-final of the FA Cup held in the Millennium Stadium? Maybe. You're like, I'm not sure. But not sure if indeed anyone has that info. But outside of the UK, never. It's just I'm wondering if anywhere outside of England, inside the UK, actually did happen. But looking forwards to this fixture, it is, of course, the first chance that a lot of us will get to see some of the new players like Gyokeres. We hope, at least. Mikel Arteta, speaking in the press conference yesterday, suggested that there's a chance that the medical staff will, of course, have a look. I'd be surprised if he started the game, but I do think that there's a small chance we could see him later on. Christian Mosquera, of course, has been training and working with his fitness the team a little bit longer than Gyokeres, so there's potential that we might therefore see him in a little bit more of an opportunity, a bit more exposure. And Spurs, of course, first time we're going to get an opportunity to see some of their new signings, or new signing, Mohamed Kudus, of course, who joined them from West Ham United. First opportunity we might get to see of him in terms of their recent pre-season fixtures. They drew 2-2 with Fulham. They then drew 0-0 with Luton in two fantastic games for Spurs. I'm just looking through their team to see if I can see anyone that I don't recognise other than what clearly are youngsters, but not really. Yes, so that was the 2-2 game with Wickham, and then they drew, as I say, 0-0 with Luton in their other fixture. So it's not been the most amazing of pre-seasons for Tottenham, and that was a strong team. Matthias Tell, Kudus, Johnson, Moore, Gray, Basuma, Danso, Spence, Van der Ven, A left back called Donnelly. I'm not sure I know too much about him. But yeah, it was a very strong team. Drew 0-0 with a Luton Town side that looked quite different from the team that used to play in the Premier League. Ruel Waters, of course, played in that game, though, formerly of Arsenal as well. So Arsenal will be looking to win this game, I think, based upon their recent results. But pre-season, did I say Fulham? I thought I said Wickham. Pre-season is never really anything you can take too much seriousness from, but it's certainly a lot of expectation, I think, still on these Arsenal players. Now, Arsenal conducted an open training session yesterday, in which we saw, of course, for the first time openly in training with fans in the stadium and able to see a certain Victor Gyokeres, of course, and he did indeed give plenty of treats to the crowd. There have been a couple of videos going around social media. One, very unserious. The cross from Ben White into him, you may have seen, where he just kind of heads into the back of an empty net. No defenders or anything like that, but it's just a cross and heading drill. But it's still got people talking online. I made the joke that, we'd obviously made the kind of the he's not great in the air discussions, of course, when we were being linked to him, which is obviously a little bit amusing. And then, of course, the big viral clip was, I think, initially posted by James McNicholas of Gyokeres firing in from some distance, to be fair, and into the top right-hand corner past, I believe, David Raya, to give, and it produced quite the roar and the ooh from the crowd, which was also kind of great. It's impossible not to get excited when seeing moments like that. And I know it's only training and these things happen with lots of players. I'm sure Havertz and Jesus have produced very similar moments in training, but obviously in front of all of these fans and cameras and stuff, it's always going to be something that kind of grabs your attention and gets blown out of proportion. But that was a nice moment. Unfortunately, what wasn't nice was the fact that Gabriel and Calafiori were both not involved in the training session. There was no sign of either of them being involved. They may have been watching from the sidelines, but there was no sign of them, sadly, being involved in the game whatsoever, involved in the training. And Arteta did speak afterwards in a pre-match press conference and was asked about these two. And certainly he sat down to suggest that, no, there is no expectation that either of these two will be involved in the game against Spurs, which obviously comes as quite the considerable blow, especially Calafiori, who we really had hoped would be in a position to do a bit more. And if it only was a slight injury, that hopefully it wasn't always going to be that damaging. In fact, let me see if I can give you the exact quote. And to be fair, I'm looking at the wrong page. But I'm sure if you want to read every word, you can do so on the Football London website. You can go and give that a read on there, and you can see every word there. So go give that a read if you want to, and it gives you all the quotes as usual. Arsenal did make a scholarship signing. Remy Lupinski has signed a 2-year scholarship deal. The 16-year-old being confirmed on the Arsenal website yesterday. Congratulations to him. He said, "I'm lost for words. It's amazing to sign for Arsenal. It's going to be unbelievable. I'm looking forward to playing for this great club, and I just can't wait to get started." He was pictured there with Per Mertesacker, of course, and he's impressed during his time at Milton Keynes, according to the website. I can't say I know anything about him, but he's said to be a brave, proactive goalkeeper. He's technically good with the ball at his feet and is looking to develop those skills during his time at the Shubarulti Training Centre. So, yes, another goalkeeper. Sign, don't you worry, we won't run out of them. Now, in transfer news of a more serious nature, with no disrespect to Remy there, Leandro Trossard, his exit is said to be gaining some more momentum. Borussia Dortmund, as we talked yesterday, are an interested party, as are a number of other clubs. But the reports swirling around the Belgian seem to be of a ilk that he is more likely to leave Arsenal now than sign a new deal, and that his representatives are actively looking for other opportunities for Trossard this summer. He, of course, still is under contract, and there is a contract offer on the table for him said to be in improving his current terms, not the extension, but his current wage bracket would be improved but there is an openness from Trossard to search for other opportunities. As we know, and as I've reported to you, any signing of a left-wing nature would require one of Trossard or Martinelli to leave the club. If it was to be Trossard, it's still difficult to see Arsenal being able to spend huge money on top of the other player, of course, that we're going to talk about in just a second. But Trossard, it seems to be, is a player that's more likely to leave this summer than not. His valuation is said to be around £20 million. The same can be said, of course, for Alexander Zinchenko. Ben Jacobs reporting yesterday that Fulham, in addition to their interest in Reiss Nelson, also have an interest in Zinchenko, who Arsenal value at around £15 million. It is thought that Anthony Robinson's future would be tied to any potential move. Robinson, the American international, has had an excellent couple of seasons with Fulham in recent years. And if he leaves, then Zinchenko, of course, would be a much firmer option for Fulham as well. So there's the report around Zinchenko and his future as of this moment. But the headline story, as you can expect to be a headline story, I believe, for the foreseeable future, is, of course, surrounding that of Eberechi Eze. Details yesterday were learned around his situation. Of course, you know that I've been doing a little bit digging around that release clause because we were being asked questions in the chat box a few days ago about whether it expires today. Some people suggested it expired today. Now, to my knowledge, it does expire in mid-August, but it does expire before the start of the Premier League season. So that would require Arsenal, if they want to activate the release clause, to do so between now and the 15th of August, but it could be slightly before then that it does expire. Eze, of course, that release clause is £67.5 million to my understanding, and Palace still would be looking to try and get the maximum value for their player. However, Arsenal are not thought to be put off by the release clause expiring. Palace aren't expected to suddenly ramp up the value of the player, ramp up the price tag of the player if that release clause expires. And if it does expire and there is still yet no agreement on a transfer, there has been some kind of suggestions or at least some theories that it could even help Arsenal's position, because if they haven't got the release clause to point to, you're in kind of a negotiating standpoint. If the player is very keen on the move, which we understand that he is very keen on the move, and if that's to be the case, of course, then it could kind of push Palace into coming to an agreement with Arsenal. The other detail, as revealed by Ed Aarons, a friend of ours, of course, from The Guardian, is that Palace would be expecting at least £35 million of any price to be paid up front. So, you know, we previously kind of heard suggestions of these installments of 20 million plus 8 million add-ons or whatever. But more reliable information is coming out now that suggests that Palace would be looking for at least 30 or around £35 million to be paid as an upfront fee, and then the additional costs would be structured, and then add-ons, of course, anything that's on top of that as well. So it would require quite a considerable, and that is a considerable upfront fee. I know we hear about a lot of deals being very expensive, but £35 million is a lot of money in upfront costs for a deal, whereas usually it would be kind of more spread out. But it could still be something that Arsenal do, but for them to be able to move ahead with any move for Eberechi Eze, as we've been discussing on the channel for some time, outgoings would be needed first. So Reiss Nelson's, your Fabio Vieiras, perhaps your Zinchenko's. He isn't tied to the futures of Trossard and Martinelli, to my knowledge, but certainly those other players that I've mentioned there, the other fringe expendable starlets, if you like, those players would be required to leave to free up funds, space in the squad, wages on the wage bill, and of course freedom within UEFA's financial fair play regulations to move for Eze. Right, let's now go to part two, which means, of course, tackling some of your questions in the chat box. I don't think it will get as deep as it did yesterday. Who knows? You never know. But let's go to some of your questions and more in the chat box right after this. Right, this is part two of today's show, which means jumping into the chat box and tackling as many of your questions as we can. So if you have got a question that you'd like to throw into the chat box, now is the time to do that. Use a capital Q. It really does help them stand out, makes it easier for me to spot them, and more likely for you to have them answered as well. So let's scroll up a little bit just to check if I've missed it. Yes, Lokonga would also be one of those other players that could yet leave as fringe stars as well. Oscar says, if Liverpool made an offer for Martinelli for 50 million in add-ons, would you take it? It depends how many the add-ons are, Oscar, I guess. But if selling Martinelli to Liverpool means Arsenal could potentially land a better player, sometimes you've got to be a bit ruthless. But I'd be curious to see if other Arsenal fans are less kind of inclined to see him move to a potential Premier League rival. I would say that it would have to have the proviso that we're bringing in a better left winger. I'm not doing it without that guarantee. That's certainly for sure. 35 says, do you think we will definitely see Gyokeres today? I don't know about definitely. I just know that there is a chance that we might see Gyokeres in action today. AR says, are Arsenal going to win the Premier League and the Champions League? I hope so, mate. Certainly hope so. Amberley says, I think there's little point worrying about where Eze fits. Seems obvious Arteta has a plan for him. Might be that we're changing some things up. Who knows? Good point. Adrian says, hi, Tom. If Zinchenko is to leave, do you think that we are covered enough in the left-back position, considering how injury-prone Calafiori seems to be? You know, this is a really fair question because it's true. While we have Miles Lewis-Skelly and we have Calafiori, that left-back position with Calafiori facing as consistent a number of injuries that he is, and now Gabriel, of course, facing the number of injuries he seems to be having to deal with, it means that Jakub Kiwior wouldn't necessarily be an obvious cover if there's an additional injury. You know, it's a really, really, really solid point. But until we get more information about Calafiori's situation, like if Calafiori had a serious injury before the end of the summer, I'd without a doubt be wanting Arsenal to go into the market and probably look to find a left back, probably on loan, to help cover that position and using the loan market to try and help them there. But I think it's a really, really fair question about whether that left back position should be thought about. The thing is, Lewis-Skelly has been very reliable, touchwood, in his attendance, and that's not been a problem for us so far, and hopefully that will continue to be the case. But he can't play every game. He can't be expected to play every game. So, yeah, I'm not sure that we can rely solely on Lewis-Skelly and Calafiori as left-back options. If you have a look into the youth team, of course, I have talked quite a lot about another exciting young defender by the name of Marcel Washington. Arsenal signed him on a permanent deal this summer. He had a trial last season after leaving Chelsea. He is very highly rated. He's 17 years of age, so he's not, still a teenager, but, he turns 18 this next month in August. He'll be 18. Same age, of course, as Miles Lewis-Skelly. So there is Marcel Washington to think about. He is indeed Ryan Bertrand's son. You're right, Daniel. So he is someone to potentially think about. I've watched him. I've gone to games in the flesh and seen him play for the youth team and was very impressed by what I saw in the little bits that I have. So he's very good going forwards. He's good to contribute in those areas. So maybe Marcel Washington is a player to watch and who could get an opportunity if indeed we do suffer some injury issues that give us the opportunity to see him play in a cup game, perhaps, as an option. Joe L says, who do you think will be the surprise or give us the best of our signings already made with the upcoming season? I think Zubimendi. I think that Zubimendi, to me, I can't pick as a surprise because I've been telling people for a long time that I think that Zubimendi is a special signing for Arsenal. I think that Mosquera is the one to look out for. He's the one we know probably the least about to see what he can provide the team and see what he's going to offer. And then you got Madueke as well, who's kind of been forgotten a little bit over the tour because, of course, he's not been with the squad and not yet made his debut. We imagine and we expect to see him in those games against Villarreal and Athletic Club also. But he, of course, is someone to look out for to see if he can offer Arsenal something different to what they've had so far and add a little bit more of the Saka style that we've missed. AR says, is Rio better than Max Dowman? Rio? Who's Rio? I don't know who Rio is. Unless I'm being an absolute fool here. Chat box, who is Rio? I don't know who Rio is. I know Rio Ferdinand's been very, very praising of Max Dowman. Yeah. Oh, the Liverpool youngster, Rio Ngumo. I'm just going to go with Gamoa. I think the end might be silent. He scored, of course, yesterday as Liverpool went 1-0 down to, was it Yokohama? I want to say, I think. Liverpool results. Yokohama, yeah, it was Yokohama. And Rio and Gamoa, who, of course, scored in the 87th minute. I think, what, 16-year-old? I don't know. I haven't seen any of him. Rio Ferdinand, yes, has been talking about Max Dowman in quite praising terms recently and piling on the pressure somewhat as well. Michael, there's no update on the City investigation, I'm afraid. We're not expecting a result for that for a while. We could get a verdict, but then they have the right to appeal, which will extend it even longer. Owen says, who do you think is going to be our best signing this season? Gyokeres is getting all the headlines, but I have a sneaky feeling that Zubimendi has gone under the radar. He's going to raise the level so much. I think you're right. Joey says, anyone worrying about Calafiori? I think everyone's worrying about it, of course. And all about Arsenal also says, are you worried? Do you have any concerns about Calafiori's fitness? Of course. It'd be absolutely naive to not have concerns about Calafiori's fitness after last season and now having an issue in pre-season as well. So we just got to hope he doesn't become the next Tomiyasu, basically. That's what we've got to hope for. We invested a lot of money in him, even though he had those issues previously with Bologna as well. It wasn't like they were, unknown to us at all. So we've got to be careful with this, and we've got to be. That's why they're not taking any risks. Niz says, do you think that there's a chance that Dowman can get more than 1,000 minutes in all competitions this season? Is there a chance? Yes, there's definitely a chance that he could get a lot of minutes this season. That is a lot of minutes. I mean, to give you some context around how many minutes Ethan Nwaneri got last season, he made 37 appearances for the club, but he made that in 1,378 minutes. So you're kind of expecting Dowman to have a similar season to that. There's a chance, but it would be a big surprise. A big surprise. It's also worth pointing out, I don't think he can play in the UEFA competition until he turns 16 in December. So in those group or league phase games, I'm not sure that he can play in those matches. He can play in the Premier League and the cup competitions, but I don't think he can play in the Champions League until the new year. That's kind of where I'm at. Rich points out that Jurrien Timber has played left back. He has played left back. That is a good point. And Most Wanted says Kivio can play at left back as well. Timber too. With White as a right back, please stop wanting defenders. We also have Mosquera in the team now as well. Yeah, and that's why I said it's also important to look to the youth team and Marcel Washington as well. Jeffrey says, what do you think Arsenal will do if Trossard leaves and Eze joins, as they are seen as separate? How much budget would remain and which targets might they pursue to strengthen the left wing? Well, this is the question, isn't it? Because to my knowledge, they are seen as separate. Eze is more reliant upon the fringe players to be sold, whereas Trossard leaving, to my knowledge, you'd think anyway, to my understanding, it would infer Arsenal therefore would go for a left winger, but he's not going to bring in transformative money. Like I always thought, for a Rodrigo deal to happen, you'd need Martinelli to go. That said, as we did talk a little bit about on the show yesterday, maybe we look to do like a high-profile loan with an obligation. We saw David Raya, of course, do that with us. We've seen Real Madrid do loans in the past, and maybe a Rodrigo loan with an obligation or an option wouldn't necessarily be entirely ruled out. So that's another potential option as well. And it says, Tom, correct me if I'm wrong. Don't worry, I will. Don't we pay 30 million up front for DR, similar to what Palace want for Eze? On a side note, Timber can play left back and Benny can play right back. I'm not sure how the Declan Rice deal kind of broke down. I never got that info. I'm sure it's out there somewhere, but I'm not sure, Anthony. So I can't correct you because I don't know how the deal broke down for Declan Rice. Football Win says, Tom, do you think this new season will be a bit like how it was years ago, a big gap between the top teams and the mid-table teams, just based on the transfer activity? Yeah, I think so. I think that the clubs like Arsenal and Liverpool, slightly more so than Man City even, I would say, although I'm not writing them off certainly, I'd still actually would put them as second favourites because of the pedigree they've got in recent seasons of winning the title. But I would say, yes, that the business that's being done by particularly the top four, with Chelsea in there as well, is opening quite a considerable gap to the others. Like the team that finished fifth last season was what? Was it Chelsea or Newcastle that finished fifth last season? Premier League table last season. The Premier League website's changed. That's weird. Okay, it won't show me on the Premier League website because it's really, really irritating. I don't know why it does it, but it does. Premier League last season, the table was, and I'm sure people are already typing it in the chat box because they're quicker than me. It was Newcastle last season that finished 5th in the table. See, already people dropping in Newcastle. It's just so much faster than me. I get it. Look, you're great at typing, or just your memory's better than mine. But yeah, last season Newcastle finished 5th. They haven't really done. Their business has been pretty poor. Did they lose yesterday to the K-League All-Stars? I think I'm pretty sure. And then Aston Villa's business has not been good. Their squad's not shaping up particularly well either. Nottingham Forest, they don't look as good as they perhaps have done last season. I don't know what their pre-season's been like. They drew 0-0 with Estoril Praia in pre-season. That's the only result that we've got so far for them. But yeah, I think that there is going to be a bigger gap between the top teams. Like last season, we had an amazing race for Champions League qualification. The title race wasn't, but for Champions League, it was really kind of close. You know, Arsenal 74, City 71, Chelsea 69, Newcastle 66, Villa 66, Forest 65, Brighton 61. You know, that 4th to 8th, there was only 8 points separating 5 teams. So, I think we're not really going to get our race as close as that this upcoming season. Let's do some members quickly. Billy Williams, thank you so much for becoming a member and joining our family. Very much appreciate you being here with us, and welcome to the TGT gang. Old Dave has been a member for 28 months. Says, I forgot how much I love this live show. Well, there you go, Old Dave, and welcome back. Thank you so much for tuning in. And Kirill, of course, who's been a member now for 8 months. Racking the miles up there. I mean, you've got a long way to get to old Dave's level. 28 months. Incredible. Some of these members, I mean, Matt G, for instance, I dread to think how long he's been a member. Daniel as well, Dan Roppers. Some of you guys have been members for a ridiculous amount of time, and I do appreciate your support. And yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure, as always, to continue joining you each morning. And he says, Tom, I'm concerned with Big Gabby. If he's not fit now, is there a possibility that he won't be ready for the start of the season? Yeah, there is a chance. Unless he starts playing in some of these friendlies back in London, it's going to be Kivior that starts out, which I'm fine with. I think Kivior is an excellent player. I think he's really showcased his ability over the last 6 to 8 months. And I think that, you know, if Gabriel isn't there, based upon how I would have felt a year ago, I'm far more confident having Kivior there. Don't forget that this is a guy that can produce not just in his own defensive third, but offensively. Think about that cross for Saka against AC Milan the other day. I really do think that Kivior is a very, very good player, and someone that we should not sleep on this season at all, and what his contributions might be. Joey says, Tom, seems like Liverpool has the best squad for next season. Would you say that we have the second best team after them? If not, where do we rank? It's us, Liverpool and City are the teams that you look at in terms of squads. So I know that Chelsea are kind of there in the background, but it's just something about Chelsea that I just can't really commit to, thinking about like them as being a viable really option this season for the title. But I could be proven wrong even after their Club World Cup exploits. But I think that Liverpool are lacking actually in a number of areas. I think that Arsenal have the most all-round squad going into this season alongside City. I think we both have kind of the most all-round. But even then, City are lacking in a couple of points. They've lost De Bruyne but brought in Cherki, and they've brought in Reinders, of course. They've got Ait Nouri as well, who's come in too, and they've kept a number of their players, but there are some that could still leave. I think Arsenal have probably the best all-round squad in the league. Like, we're covered so well across multiple roles, but there is a couple of injury question marks. Paul says Kivior is terrible. Paul's not watched football in the last year, clearly. Ambly says Kivior is not terrible at all. He stepped up big time last season when Gabby is out. So Nicholas says people keep mentioning Kivior's name in a list of players that we need to sell, and I don't think we can afford to. I think that people that list Kivior in a pool of players that we need to sell are not necessarily thinking he's bad. I think the majority, I think some will, but as shown by Paul. But I think there is an argument that they feel as though his value is at its peak amount, and we're not necessarily going to be able to get as much money for Kivior as we would this summer again. I think at this point, I'm not fussed about selling Kivior. I don't think we need the money necessarily the way that we can do by bringing in money for some of the other players that we could sell to then move for others. I think Kivior is a really good left centre half. I think at left back, he is vulnerable. And that's why people kind of have that view of him from when he played left back. He's not a left back. He could play there in times of emergency, but Kivior as a left centre half for me is good. And that's why he's managed to lock down teams like Real Madrid and do so well against them. So, yeah, for me, Kivior is a good player. Terribly good, says Jay Knotts. Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. Moray says, good morning, Tom. How are you? I'm Moray from Sierra Leone. We had a listener from Sierra Leone on recently who was kind of was he heading up the Sierra Leone Arsenal supporters? I think it was Sierra Leone, if my memory serves me right. I'm optimistic that if Arsenal can add one or two more players, we are going to win the league. Well, I think there's a good chance we add one more player. The odds of adding two more players is a lot lower, but at least I would hope at least one more. That being Eze comes in before the end of this summer transfer window. Rand says, Tom, it's boring. Why do we mostly agree on things? Because we're just smart people, Rancid. We can't help it. We're born like it. Paul says, I'm Paul, and I really like Kivior. I'm a Paul, and I really like Kivior. My only criticism of him is that he's not vocal enough. He is a little bit shy, and he's been with us for a little while now. But I think he didn't speak really any English when he arrived from Italy. He speaks Polish. I don't even know how much Italian, if any, he spoke either from his time with Spezia. So you've gone from Poland to Italy, now to England. Very different, but the Polish language is so different to the English. It's not like coming from Spain or Germany or Italy or France, where there are some similarities, between the languages. They're all kind of they all spawn from one another in so ways. There's so many inspirations from each of those languages in each other. Polish is really difficult. It's a really difficult. I mean, obviously, when you're brought up with it, it's easy, but to learn another language as a Pole, is really hard. And I always have so much respect if I meet anyone Polish here in the UK and they speak fluently. I'd worked with a couple of teachers, of course, who came from kind of the Eastern European countries that have learned English, despite the fact that the language is so different to their own. So, yeah, I think that has played a part in Kivior's struggle to transition into an Arsenal team. But he is learning. He is improving. And I think that he will become more vocal as well. King says, boring is good sometimes. All the time, maybe, as well. I think that if most of us agreeing, it must mean that we're in Arsenal in a kind of a pretty good place. And Arsenal are in a good place. And we're going into a season with a lot of expectation around it as well. One Didier says, can we have Kepa play a full game this preseason? David Raya's played way too much football. I don't think so. I don't think Kepa came off the bench in the last two friendlies. He played half the game and the penalties against Milan. He came on in the second half against Newcastle. I think it's fine. I think Kepa's played a fine amount, and I think he'll play a similar amount probably in today's game against Spurs as well. There's over 2,000 of you tuning in on YouTube. Thank you so much to so many of you that are listening. Make sure if you haven't done so already, drop a like. If you're listening on catch up, leave us a 5-star review. It does help out. And if you want to leave a written review on iTunes, that would be really helpful as well. Any review always helps us out. But if you leave a 5-star review and some kind words, it makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside. So if you could do that, that'd be great. Aoife says, can we acknowledge how much metal it takes to join a new employer with so much pressure, with zero language skills and a role that requires communication? I think that's a really good point, Aoife. Nike says, what will be Kivior and Mosquera's roles? Well, they are the number twos. Kivior is the number two to Gabriel, and Mosquera will be the number two to Saliba. That will be their roles, and they'll play cup games and they'll start some European games and will probably, depending on their form, rotate here and there, and they'll come off the bench. And yeah, I think that's probably fair. Derek says, hi, mate. Missed a few shows. Orny has mentioned Gordon a lot. Do you think there is something? I mean, when David speaks, you listen. That's the rule. But yes, there is. Arsenal do have interest in Gordon, but it's a very difficult deal and quite an expensive deal to do. Newcastle, of course, could be losing Isak. So the idea that they would also be open to selling Gordon as well, their top two players in their team, it seems very, very unlikely indeed. Yaya says, Joel Hato is the player that we should have bought when we bought Calafiori. And I think that that's an absolutely fair thing to point out. You know, Joel Hato was a lot younger then, granted, and Ajax were less keen on selling him. We were actually quite keen on him that summer, but he ended up signing a brand new contract, I believe, that year. So I think that's a fair point. I don't have too much to argue back to that. Let's go to Daniel, who says, with the strength of the Liverpool squad, would we call the coming season a failure if we don't win the Premier League, even if we don't have too many series? It depends on what happens, Daniel, doesn't it? Like, it depends. Our aim is to win the league. That is the aim. The aim is to win the title. So if we don't win the title, we would have to have a conversation about why we didn't win the title. Was it we were great, but Liverpool were greater? Or was it we weren't good enough? And it's on us as to why we weren't good enough. You have to have a conversation at the conclusion to see what led us to that stage and why that happened. So, yeah, I think we will have to wait and see. Magalhaes says, why do you keep ignoring my question? Because there's 2,000 people watching, Magalhaes, and the world doesn't revolve around you. That's probably why, and I've probably just missed it. So it's nothing personal, all right? Chill out, Fran. Chill out. Damien says, what other teams do you have a soft spot for? What teams do I did have a soft spot for Forest because I lived in Nottingham for 3 years when I was there at uni, and they weren't in the Premier League. So I did have a soft spot for them, but their behaviour, and particularly the behaviour of their owner, I struggle. I struggle with that. I struggle with the idea of having a soft spot for them. I don't want them ever to go down, but I'm kind of in a period now where I don't really want them to do well. So, yeah, I struggle with that. Other clubs, of course, as you know, typically when I go abroad, not to watch games, you know, if I'm watching games for work, I'll bring home a keyring or a fridge magnet. But if I'm on holiday abroad, that's when I tend to buy a shirt. So I've bought, when I was in Canada, I bought a Vancouver Whitecap shirt, as you know. If I've been to Florence, I bought a Fiorentina shirt. If I've been in, where else? I've got loads. Why can't I think? When I was in Italy last year, I bought Italian national team because I was in Siena, and their team doesn't really have a club shop because they've been so poor over recent years. So yeah, that's it's just part and parcel of that. The Red Bull Salzburg has always been a club I've had a soft spot for because I've really enjoyed in previous years kind of seeing what young talents have been coming through the academy there and the journey that so many successful talents have had there. So Salzburg certainly as well. Lisbon also were a team that I kind of had a soft spot for, Sporting Club de Portugal. But kind of the behaviour of the presidents put me off them a little bit as well. So yeah, I've got a lot of teams with soft spots, and yes, Thomas Muller looks like he's off to Vancouver Whitecaps as well. I'm kind of a bit annoyed it didn't happen sooner. Otherwise, I probably would have got him on the back of my shirt. But I didn't have anyone on the back of the shirt. And now, just am I creating a fantasy league? Yes, I was supposed to do it yesterday, but I completely forgot. I'm sorry. I will try to remember to make that today. I just need to reactivate it, and then everybody's in it. So I will reactivate it. It's just, yeah, I haven't got round to it. Christian says, "Well, Tom, never knew you went to Nottingham. What were your thoughts?" Love it. Absolutely love Nottingham. Back in my day, I sound like an old man, but you know, Forum, which is now I think Pom Pom. It's the name of the club now. Bodega, which I still think is Bodega, and Rock City, and obviously I went to Trent, so the SU at Trent because I'd rather be a poly than what's the word? Yeah, that for me is it was a great city and a great 3 years, and I loved my time there. So Trent Army, that's what I'm talking about. David Seaman says, "Hey Tom from Canada, if we don't sign Eze or any of our other links this summer, could you see us signing or moving for these players in January?" Thank you, David Seaman, for joining us. I don't know if it's that David Seaman. I don't think so. But could I see us signing or moving on for these players in January? Certainly. There's definitely a chance. If Arsenal don't end up signing Eze now, It could be that we have them there. I mean, we have some money still to spend, but it's more about space in the squad at the moment and the wage bill and UEFA financial fair play. If we can move on some of these fringe, I like the word expendable. The word is surplus. That's the word I'm looking for. Surplus players. That, I think, is where you'll see the movement then start to happen. Luke says, do you have a... Not reading that question out. No, thank you. It's not how it's spelt. Liam said, hashtag Danny, he's joined Sunderland. Yes, he has. Granit Xhaka has joined Sunderland. What an amazing time we live in, eh? We're going to get to see him play. Shall we answer Malachi? Is it Malachi? I think it was. I've got a terrible memory. Shall we answer his question now, or shall we leave it? I'm such a mean person. Malachi said, would you not keep Trossard? He's proven to be more clutch than Martinelli in the last 2 seasons, more clinical, whereas Martinelli has his head down and doesn't really think that will change, and we can get more money for him. Well, we can't get money for a player that doesn't have anybody coming in to pay for them. So even though in theory your theory is correct that we would get more money for him, unless somebody comes in for Martinelli, which they aren't and don't look like they will, we can't sell it. Trossard, on the other hand, does seemingly have quite a considerable amount of interest and would open the door to us to bring in somebody in. He's also nearly 31, and not only that, and he is 30 until he's 31, and not only that, but his numbers have not been great, but neither have Martinelli's. So there you go. More than a wheelchair says, Tom, do you realistically give Arteta 3 more seasons to win something big? 1 season player settles, then 2 to win. I want to win something this season, mate. And again, I really don't really get into kind of the whole Arteta in, Arteta out rubbish. I just think it's crap, to be fair. I just think you need to watch football, wait to see what happens, and then go from there. If you start setting out kind of things like, if he doesn't do this season, he's gone. I just think it's pointless. I just think it's a terrible way to watch football. Jamsey says, would you agree that the Gyokeres shirt sales record suggests that Arsenal should be more prepared to bring in star signings, as they'll likely see a quick return on outlay through sheer hype? Well, even though he's obviously broken the record, we don't know how much of that Arsenal actually get back in terms of commercial revenue, because of course Adidas are the shirt manufacturer, so they'll take a very large chunk of that. So it's not, I don't think it's making back a huge, I could be wrong, but I don't expect it to be making back a huge number. And to be honest, Arsenal do sign star players and have done. We only 2 years ago we spent 100 million quid on Declan Rice. So this idea that we don't sign star players, I don't think is very true. Malachi says, thank you for answering my question. Everybody else for answering. Sorry for my impatience. You are forgiven. Your apology is accepted, Malachi. It's busy. It gets busy in the chat. I cannot see every single comment. I scroll, I miss things, and sometimes I intentionally to click on a super chat like Luke's and then refuse to read them out because they're being cheeky. You know what? Aoife says, Granit back in the league is going to be interesting. Does he get the same bias treatment, or are the pundits going to do a 180, proving that it's just an anti-Arsenal agenda? I don't know. So we will have to wait and see, won't we, Aoife? But Granit Xhaka certainly had certain treatment that I feel other players didn't get when he was in the league. And I feel he was one of those players that got a bit of reputation. And as a result, as we have heard referees who have since left the game talk about, they are privy to biases and to treating players differently as a result. We've heard the referees speak about that. So, let's wait and see what happens. Wazza says, Tom, since Arteta took over, out of all of the players that we have sold, which one do you wish that we'd have kept for a bit longer? Could be anyone. Doesn't matter if they was from the first team. That's a great question. So let me just go on to all of our sales. What player do I regret selling? What player do I wish we had have kept? I mean, I could say Granit Xhaka. Yeah, I wish kind of he would have wanted to stay and been in that next group and played with Declan Rice in some ways. I actually feel that with Granit Xhaka in the team during the 23-24 season, he may have been the difference between Arsenal winning or not winning the title, having him there. So maybe we wouldn't have signed, somebody else in his place. But I really do think that him not being there was big in that 23-24 season. A lot of you are naming players that are not in the Mikel Arteta era. Alexis Sanchez was sold before that. So was Fabregas. So was Gnabry. Right, I'm going to tell something I used to tell my students when I was a teacher. Read the damn question. Read the question, people. That's the answer that you need. If you read the question, you'll know what the answer's properly going to be. People are saying Guendouzi. I mean, his temperament was always in question, wasn't it? Emi Martinez is not a bad shout either. What we might have saved in goalkeeper terms, what we might have gone on to love Emi Martinez in a different way, I don't know. But to be honest, there's not too many. And I think that counts to something. I think that counts to Arsenal being quite shrewd in how they've sold players. I don't think we've learned to regret. I don't think we've gone on to regret anyone. I mean, people thought we would regret selling Balogun, but we haven't. I do genuinely believe the only player I've regretted selling at the time that he left is Granit Xhaka. I think he's the only one for me that I regret during Arteta's tenure letting go when he left. And I remember speaking to him, at Forest. I spoke to him after the game, and he made it very clear, even though it was announced kind of a little while after, we thought it was going to get announced in a few days. I remember me and Simon Collins and Evening Standard was standing in the mix zone after the 1-0 defeat to Forest that season in 22-23. And it was so obvious that he was he'd made peace with it. Like, it was so obvious that he was also gutted that the league hadn't finished in the way that he wanted, even though the target that season was to qualify for the Champions League, and we'd achieved that. But it was I could sense it in the way he was speaking to me then that, I think he was gutted that he'd missed out on the chance to win it. And obviously he went and won the league with Bayer Leverkusen the season after and went and became an invincible with them. So, yeah. Some of you are really, really missing the question. Aiden Heaven is a serious suggestion from Keith. I think that's probably a good one. Aiden Heaven, Chido Obi Martin, you could look to as well. But these were players that, they weren't really sold, they just didn't want to renew their contracts. There was another suggestion somewhere. Mika Biereth, Mika Biereth is often one that's talked about. He went to Sturm Graz in a deal that, he went to Motherwell on loan, did well. They didn't want to lose him in January, but Arsenal thought they could send him on loan to a higher level club. So they sent him to play for a Champions League side at that time in Sturm Graz, or Europa League team, certainly in that time, European qualified team in Sturm Graz. And then in the summer, they spent, I think it was £4 million on Mika Biereth, which was a record for Sturm Graz. That was a record fee for them. So that tells you kind of Motherwell. It was at Motherwell. Why are you saying Motherwell lol? Yes, he was there. He went to Motherwell on loan. He was there for half a season, and then he went on loan to Sturm Graz, and then they paid a record fee for their club. And then he had a brilliant season where he won the title with them in Austria. And he won the title in the season he was on loan, spent the first half of the season with them after the permanent move. And then Monaco came in last season, signed him in January for, I think it was 20? Was it 20? Monaco sign Mika Biereth. How much did they pay? 5-year contract. Yes, we know that. I want to know how much money they paid for him. It's not telling me for some reason. I'll have a look on Transfermarkt. It'll give me a rough 13 million euros. It says that. I think it was closer to 20, but that might be with add-ons. So Arsenal got a little bit with the sell-on. There was a sell-on clause there, but I wouldn't have made loads of money. But it wasn't one that we can sit there and say, oh, we should have given Mika Biereth a chance. Like, no one was really saying that at the time. Like, no one seriously was saying Arsenal should go and use Mika Biereth, because we had Jesus then, we had Havertz, and we were looking to try and bring in a top striker in the near future, as we have done now. So, yeah, Mika Biereth is always a player that kind of gets brought up in these kind of, we regret losing him. But realistically, he was never going to stay, nor was he ever going to bring us in the level of money that he ended up bringing in Sturm Graz, which wasn't even then a lot of money either. Right, that is the end of today's show. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in. Really appreciate your time. I hope you have an absolutely fantastic day. Enjoy yourself. Stay safe, stay well, stay happy and respectful. And as always, up the Arsenal.